My greetings to the learned audience. Today we look into the poem The TINTERN Abbey Lines, the most famous poems written by William Wordsworth. Let's see. The poem Lines, composed on a few lines about TINTERN Abbey, is generally known as TINTERN Abbey, written in 1798 by the father of Romanticism, William Wordsworth. TINTERN Abbey is one of the triumphs of Wordsworth's genius. TINTERN Abbey was founded on 9th May 1131 by Walter de Clare, Lord of Chepstow. It is situated adjacent to the village of TINTERN in Monmouthshire on the Welsh bank of the River Wey, which at this location forms the border between Monmouthshire in Wales and Gloucestershire in England. It was the first Cistercian foundation in Wales and the only second in Britain after Waverley Abbey. The abbey fell into ruin after the dissolution of the monasteries in the 16th century. Its remains have been celebrated in poetry and painting from the 18th century onwards. In 1984, Card took over responsibility for managing the site. TINTERN Abbey is visited approximately 70,000 people every year. It may he called a condensed spiritual autobiography of the poet. It deals with the subjective experiences of the poet and traces the growth of his mind through different periods of his life. Nature and its influence on the poet in various stage forms is the main theme of the poem TINTERN Abbey Lines. The poem deals with the influence of nature on the boy, the growing youth, and then the adult man. The poet has expressed his tender feeling towards the nature. He has specially recollected his poetic idea of TINTERN Abbey, where he had gone first time in 1793. This is his second visit in 1798 after 5 long years. So here he expressed his intense faith in nature and his realization of God in nature. He got this sensuous delight in it and all to him. So in TINTERN Abbey impressed him the most when he had first visited this place. He has again come after 5 years to the same place where he could see the lofty cliffs and plots of cottage ground, orchard groves and copses. He is glad to see again the hedgerows, spotty wood, pastoral farms and green doors. This lonely place, the banks of the river and rolling waters from the mountain springs present a beautiful panoramic light. The solitary place reminds the poet of vibrant dwellers and hermit's cave. The poem is in 5 sections. The first section establishes the setting for the meditation, but it emphasizes the passage of time. 5 years have passed, 5 summers and 5 long winters, he says. But when the poet is back to this place of natural beauty and serenity, it is still essentially the same. So the poem opens with a slow dragging rhythm and the repetition of the word 5, all designed to emphasize the weight of the time which has separated the poet from this particular scene. Then the subsequent lines develop a clear visual picture of the scene. The view presented is a blend of wildness and order. He can see the entirety. There he can see the entirely natural cliffs and waterfalls. He can see the hedges around the fields of the people, and he can see the wreaths of smoke, probably coming from some hermits making fire in their cave hermitages. These images evoke not only a pure nature as one might expect, they evoke a life of the common people in harmony with the nature. That's all about the first section, and in second session begins with the meditation of the poet. The poet now realizes that these beauteous forms have always been with him, deep seated in his mind, wherever he went, even after this long 5 years. This vision has been felt in the blood and felt along the heart. That is, it has affected his whole being. They were not absent from his mind like form the mind of a man born blind. In hours of tiredness, frustration, and anxiety, these things of nature used to make him feel sweet. And he used to feel it at the level of impulse. He should feel it in his heart rather than his waking consciousness and his thorough reasoning. So from this point onward, Wordsworth begins to consider the sublime of nature, and his mystical awareness becomes clear now. Wordsworth's idea was that human beings are naturally uncorrupted. The poet studies the nature with his open eyes and his imaginative mind. Since he has been the lover of nature from the core of his heart, with his purer mind, he feels the sensation of love for nature in his blood. He feels high pleasure and deep power of joy in natural objects. The beating of his heart are full of the fire of nature's love. Then he concentrates attention to the Sylvian way, a majestic and worth-seeing river that he often refers in his poems. He is reminded the pictures of the past visit and ponders over his future years. On his first visit to this place, he bounded over the mountains by the sides of the deep rivers and lovely streams. In the past, the soundings haunted him like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, and the deep and gloomy wood were then to him like an appetite. But that time is gone now. In nature, he finds the sad music of humanity. Now, the third section contains a kind of doubt, confusion. The poet is probably reflecting the reader's possible doubts so that he can go on to justify how he is right and what he really means. He doubts for just a moment whether this thought about the influence of nature is vain. But he can't go on. He exclaims, "Yet, oh, how often amid the joyless day-night, fretful and unprofitable fever of the world, have I turned to these nature for inspiration and peace of mind." He thanks the Sylvian way for the everlasting influence it has imprinted in his mind, and his spirit has very often turned to this river for inspiration when he was losing the peace of mind or the path of life. The river has become a symbol of spirituality here. Though the poet has become serious and perplexed in the fourth section, the nature gives the courage and spirit enough to stand there with a sense of delight and pleasure. This is so typical of Wordsworth that it seems he can't write poetry without recounting his personal experiences, especially those of his childhood. He also begins from the earliest of his days. It was first of the coarse pleasures in his boyish days, which have all gone by now. The time is past, and all its aching joys are now no more, and all its dizzy raptures have gone. But the poet does not mourn for them. He doesn't even grumble about their loss, because he finds more joys and different experience as he grows up. Clearly, he has gained something in return. The other gifts are followed for such loss. For I have learned to look upon nature not as an hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still sad music of humanity. This is a philosophic statement about maturing, growing up, development of personality, and he has become very philosophic here. So now the poet is able to feel the joy of elevation of thought, elevated thought, a sense of sublime and far more deeply interfused. He feels a sense of sublime and the working of a supreme power in the light of setting sun, in round oceans and in blue sky. He is of the opinion that emotion and a spirit impel all thinking things. Therefore, Wordsworth claims that he is a lover of meadows and of all which we see from this green earth. He considers nature as a nurse, as a guide, guardian, etc. So the poet comes to one important conclusion. What's it? For all the formative influences, he is now consciously in love with nature. He has become a thoughtful lover of the meadows, woods, and the cliffs and mountains. Though his ears and eyes seem to create the other half of all these sensations, the nature is the actual source of these sublime thoughts. The fifth and last section continues with the same meditation, from where the poet addresses his younger sister Dorothy, whom he blesses and gives advice about what he has learned in all his years of experience. He says that he can hear the voice of his own youth when he hears Dorothy speaks, the language of his former heart when he was a child. He is excited to look at his own youthful image in her. He says that the nature has never betrayed his heart, and that is why they had been living from joy to joy. Nature as a whole impresses his mind. The poet then begins to address the moon of his reverie and asks the nature to bestow his sister with their blessings. Let the moon shine on her solitary walk, he says. When the present youthful ecstasies are over, as they did with him, let her mind become more palace of lovely forms and thoughts. The conclusion of the poem takes us almost cyclically back to the physical view of the steep woods, lofty cliffs, and green pastoral landscapes in which the meditation of the poem is happening. The poet has expressed his honest and natural feelings to the nature's superiority. The language is so simple, lucid, that one is not tired of reading it again and again. And the sweetness of style touches every heart of the readers. Lines composed a few miles above TINTERN Abbey is not written with a clear rhyme scheme, but rather the poet has focused on the meter, so you can say it has followed blank verse. And talking about the pattern of meter, it is iambic pentameter, and this types of verse is made up of 5 sets of beats per line. The first beat is unstressed and followed by one stressed. And this is all about the poem TINTERN Abbey. Hope you all enjoyed. Thank you.